Iron Betting Insights. Glad to have you in on a Thursday night. I'm Jay Sanin, and tonight we have a loaded show as we preview Week 2 in the NFL. We'll start, of course, with our degenerate pregame show. Instead of listening to Terry and Howie or Rich Eisen or whoever, James Brown, all those guys, listen to me. Instead of us talking about who's going to win the game straight up and all that boring stuff, we're going to talk about what really matters, making some money on tonight's game between the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll also give you the BetQL game of the week, get you some great information ahead of that game, as well as Quick Slants, our feature every Thursday, where we go real fast, rapid fire throughout the entire NFL, get you ready for each game. And then, of course, you want to stay tuned to the end of the show, where I give you my Week 2 NFL picks. Don't forget last week's picks, 4-0-1 on spreads and totals, undefeated, never lost in the 2020 NFL season. So stay tuned to the GBI show. We'll get you all that and a whole lot more as we get going here in front of a live studio audience in upstate New York. So we'll start tonight with our degenerate pregame show. It is the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Bengals a 6-point dog, total sitting at 43.5. Those lines from BetQL as of moments ago. Both teams coming off of losses in Week 1. The Browns, they took an embarrassing loss to the Baltimore Ravens. That was a 38-6 ball game. They will look to avoid getting pooped on for the second straight week, with the exception, of course, of Odell Beckham Jr., who allegedly welcomes that sort of thing. The Cincinnati Bengals, they lose a tight game in Week 1. They lose 16-13, a pretty surprising start for the Bengals, as they were very competitive with Tyrod Taylor and the Los Angeles Chargers. They got down the field late in the fourth quarter, had a chance to win the game, couldn't get it done. They miss a field goal from close range, and they end up losing that game by 3. Don't even get to overtime in that situation. So both teams coming off of a loss. And Week 2 in the NFL, that's a week full of overreactions, right? Teams lose in Week 1, and all of a sudden, with a small sample size from which to draw, a lot of the betting public will sit there and say, okay, well, this team's just no good, instead of looking at the reasons why they may have failed in Week 1. And of course, that's all going to favor the Browns this week, as they were absolutely thumped by the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. So our only impression so far this season of the Browns is, boy, this team lost by 32 points in a division game as an underdog. Not something you want to see if you're a Browns fan or if you're somebody who backed them in Week 1, of course. But it could help us here, as, let's say, hypothetically, they had played a competitive game against the against the Ravens. No, they are the Browns. My bad. Say they played a competitive game against the Ravens. The line you see tonight, probably a lot higher than 6 against the Bengals team with a rookie quarterback on the road for the first time as a professional. Now let's look at the two teams individually here. And let's look first at the total as it involves them. So you've had some action to the under here as the total opened up at 46. It's down almost a full field goal to 43.5. And we'll start with the Bengals, the visitors, and we'll start with Joe Burrow as a pretty big reason for that move to the under. Now, Burrow came out last week and failed to reach 200 yards passing. Deep into the second half, he had failed to break 100 yards. He played decent football in the fourth quarter and played very well in the final drive for the Bengals, even though it wasn't good enough. But you saw the growing pains for a rookie quarterback against an NFL pass rush. Of course, he's unlucky to take on the Los Angeles Chargers in his first game, a team with one of the best pass rushes in the sport. But for Burrow, things aren't going to get any easier here tonight, as he has to take on Myles Garrett, the leader of the Cleveland Browns defensive front, on the road in his first road start, a recipe that would lean toward a lower scoring affair. Now, looking at the Cleveland Browns, they're not exactly in paradise offensively either, as Baker Mayfield last week put up an abysmal performance against the Baltimore Ravens. And again, he's a guy who's very turnover prone. He showed that last week. And a guy who just really struggling to get one of the best receivers in the game, and Odell Beckham, on the same page with him. to the point where we're already talking about chemistry issues and how are they going to fix it. I mean, it could just be a problem with the quarterback, even though that's something that you don't like to admit if you're the Cleveland Browns. You might have picked the wrong guy at number one. Now, as far as this game goes, I don't like either side on the spread. I don't love the total either, even though, again, what you saw in week one might lead you to think the under is the better play. I'd rather get a better sample size from two bad teams than to overreact to what I saw in the first week or try to divine some sort of positive performance that might just not be there yet for these two teams, given where they are as franchises. Of course, the Bengals are just restarting as a whole after drafting Joe Burrow, and and the Browns not quite there yet with Baker Mayfield. I don't trust either of these teams to cover the line. This game could either be a blowout in the favor of Cleveland, or it could be a disappointing performance from the Browns. Either way, I am not nearly qualified to pick out which of those two outcomes we might see here tonight. Don't love the total either, but I do like one proposition heading into this game that I think, if you can find it, is worth taking a look at. And that relates to Joe Burrow, rookie quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. I like the under 240 and a half passing yards for Burrow. Is sitting around minus 125 at DraftKings about an hour ago as we finished our pre-show production meeting here at QL TV. And Burrow, we mentioned it earlier, failed to reach 200 yards last week. And there's an argument to be made that he might be even worse tonight on the road. Of course, no fans in attendance is going to be a factor. But with or without fans, he's not in an environment that he's comfortable with yet against the Cleveland Browns team who is desperate for a win at 0-1 and knows that this might be their best chance in a while to get said win. I think Joe Burrow's growing pains are going to continue because of that. And again, it's not like he got close to 240 yards last week. He was under 100 yards pretty deep into that second half. So I feel pretty confident with the under 240 and a half total yards through the air for Joe Burrow. Other than that, again, not a lot to love in this game. Some injury concerns. Jarvis Landry still dealing with some injuries. He is expected to play tonight, but I don't think that I can trust him to score touchdown markets. I don't know what's going on with Beckham and Baker Mayfield. I don't trust him. Two running backs in Cleveland make it tough to pick one in terms of a running back getting into the end zone. And again, I don't know if anybody's going to get in the end zone for the Cincinnati Bengals. They got into the end zone one time last week, and I mean, the seas just parted for Joe Burrow on that rushing touchdown as the Chargers, playing man defense, just didn't pay any attention to the rookie quarterback. He was able to gallop in, but no skill position player made it into the end zone last week for Cincinnati. Again, this is a game where the Browns have won each of the last four meetings between these teams dating back to the 2018 season. But you should keep in mind how different the roster was for the Bengals back in 2018 and 2019, as they did not yet have at least who they hoped to be their young franchise quarterback. So again, nothing on the side, nothing on the total for me, but give me Joe Burrow under 240 and a half yards tonight in Thursday Night Football. So that is your degenerate pregame show. Now go forth and try and win some money on tonight's game. But maybe don't watch it. Maybe don't watch this game between the Browns and the Bengals. Maybe stick with us for the full show, because I don't think it's going to be a great watch tonight, particularly in the AFC North. Now we'll get to the BetQL game of the week. And the game of the week tonight is going to be Sunday's clash between the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a pick'em game, total at 45 and a half. And this is an interesting game because this is what you talk about when you talk about the overreactions to week one. The LA Rams, they win at home, their first game in that $5 billion monstrosity of a stadium with a roof that apparently you could still get sunburn from, that SoFi Stadium. I was a little alarmed by that. But they get the win over the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys, though, tons of injuries Defensively, they're all mangled in the defensive side of the ball. We'll talk about that later in quick slants. Offensive line messed up as well. And the Rams defense, to their credit, did a great job taking advantage of the problems the Cowboys had offensively during that game. Eagles, on the other hand, they were the ones with the problems in their week 1 game against the Washington football team, as the football team's pass rush got to Carson Wentz at will due to some injuries on Philly's offensive line. Now, Philly, they will have Lane Johnson back in this game, their offensive tackle, one of the key pieces to that team anywhere on the field. They will also have running back Miles Sanders back for the game. So 2 huge returns for the Eagles in this ball game. Now, this is a game where our projections at BetQL have the Rams a half a point better than the Eagles. So they're saying there's not a ton of value in taking the spread in this one. I'm inclined to disagree only because of the week 2 overreaction factor. Now, like we talk about every year, and like we talked about at the beginning of the show, people tend to overreact to what they saw in week 1. There was no bigger gap, in my opinion, between what you saw in week 1 and the reality of these teams than with these squads right here. Rams aren't going to play that well defensively every week, and the Eagles will be much better offensively in some weeks. Keep this in mind. The Rams, first road game of the season, have to travel from LA all the way to Philadelphia. After this game, because of the COVID protocols, normally they'd stay on the East Coast. They have to go back to Los Angeles and then travel to Buffalo in a wildly inefficient route to their games between week 2 and week 3. How is that going to affect the mentality of the Rams, on top of the fact that these teams should both kind of regress to the mean a little bit in week 2? A lot of people out there in the betting public, they disagree with me. Per BetQL, 66% of the tickets on this game are on the Rams, 69% of the money on Los Angeles as well. And if anything, that makes me enjoy the fact that I'm being a contrarian here in this week 2 matchup. By the way, this line opened up at Philly minus 4.5. So their performances in week 1 caused it to come back to a pick 'em. You're getting a good number with Philadelphia on top of going against the will of the public after what they saw in that week 1 game. Sign me up for that one. 6 straight wins for the Eagles against the Rams dating back to 2005. Obviously, that's a little bit too far of a time frame, in my opinion, to make a judgment, because wholly different rosters from 2005 to now. But these teams have played twice recently, 2017 and 2018, the Eagles winning both of those matchups within that 6-game winning streak. One of those games, by the way, being in Los Angeles when Carson Wentz injured his knee, was lost for the season when the Eagles behind Nick Foles went on to win the Super Bowl. So again, the Eagles have had success against the Rams in the recent past, and I think that is set to continue. That will be one of my picks later in the show. I'll spoil one for you, give you a little taste so you can stick around until the end of the program to figure out what else I'm on in week 2. Now, the BetQL game of the week, of course, brought to you by BetQL.co. Get all kinds of valuable NFL betting data, like what you just heard about Rams and Eagles, at BetQL.co. Sign up now using promo code Sanin, that's SANIN, for 20% off of any subscription on the site. Whether you want to do it for 1 week, see how it works, or go for the full season, completely up to you. 20% off of any of those at BetQL.co using promo code Sanin. Now, second half of the show, it's time for quick slants on a Thursday. And this is the part of the show where we run through the rest of the games on the NFL schedule. During the early parts of the season, with 16 games on the schedule, that means we got 14 games left to cover. This is like the lightning round of NFL betting previews. It's quick slants. Let's get started. Jaguars, 8.5-point dogs at the Titans total at 43. Jags, of course, with the shock of the week, upsetting the Indianapolis Colts in week 1, while the Titans hung on for dear life and managed to beat the Denver Broncos in the first week of the season in the second half of the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Line opened at Titans minus 11. Their unconvincing performance in week 1 contributing to the drop in the betting line you see here I don't like it either way. I do think the Jaguars are the worst team in the NFL. By the way, my Jaguars 20-1 to not win a game this season didn't last as long as I'd hoped. Let's leave it at that. But no bet for me here. I want to see more of this Titans team because Ryan Tannehill looked nothing like the quarterback that we saw last season. Derrick Henry had trouble getting going as well last week. I want to see what of that had to do with the altitude against maybe these guys just taking a step back next year. And I still don't know what to think of the Jaguars after a win, but I still think they might be the worst team in the league. I want to get some more information on both of these squads. Next up, Lions +6 at the Packers, total 49.5. I mentioned this one on Tuesday. I am on the Packers -6 in this game. Listen, the Lions choked away a winnable home game against the Bears last week, giving up 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns to Mitchell Trubisky, a quarterback so bad that they brought in his replacement and dangled that replacement in front of him to try and scare him into playing better. He did play better in the fourth quarter, but he was in rough shape the rest of that game, whereas the Packers might have had the most impressive performance in all of week one, rolling up 522 total yards of offense against the Minnesota defense that many thought would be the best in the league. I firmly believe that the drafting of Jordan Love will motivate Aaron Rodgers through this season, and we might see an MVP caliber campaign out of him, even if he didn't get the help he wanted in the receiving game in the draft. I think the Packers roll in this game. I have them -6. Next up, the Giants, 5.5-point underdogs taking on the aforementioned Mitchell Trubisky and the Chicago Bears, total at 42. Both of these teams lost in week one. No, that's wrong. Both of these teams should have lost in week one, is what I meant. The Giants did. The Bears should have managed to come back and win against the Lions in that ridiculous fourth quarter. Again, 21 unanswered for the Bears in that fourth quarter. Here's the problem with this game. I have 2 quarterbacks that I can't trust. Daniel Jones has proven I can't trust him. 279 yards last week, 2 touchdowns, but he threw 2 picks, including that awful red zone interception. I don't care if the ball was tipped. There were so many defenders around there. It made no sense to attempt to throw that ball. He still isn't making the decisions on the level you need a starting quarterback to make in this league. And Trubisky, without that fourth quarter, would have had a disastrous game for Chicago. I want no part of either of these offenses, even if their defenses did step up at different times throughout their respective games, staying far away from this battle, which could help decide the fate of the number 1 pick in the draft later in this season with the way these 2 teams lined up for the majority of their games last week. Next up, quick slants. Minnesota Vikings, 3-point dogs at the Indianapolis Colts, total 48.5. A lot on the line in this game. 2 teams are going to come out desperate because they both lost in week one. And we know that the chances of a team making the playoffs after an 0-2 start, while not quite 0, it's rare. Vikings, they just got beat by a better quarterback last week. They lost to Aaron Rodgers, a 43-34 game. Kirk Cousins didn't play badly despite the loss. And the Vikings, because they were down so much in the game, actually led the league in yards per play in week one, racking up over 7.5 yards every time they snapped the ball on average. Colts, meanwhile, suffered the most embarrassing loss, one of the most embarrassing losses, you could argue, in the history of the franchise, when they lost to that Jacksonville Jaguars team by a touchdown in Jacksonville last week in front of 16,000 or so fans. I think the Vikings will come out and win this game based off of what I saw and the fact that they're playing indoors this week, which they're used to at their home field. But I don't want to go against the Colts in a desperate spot. I think there are better opportunities this week to lay down some bets. But this is one of the games that I am looking forward to watching the most, even if I wouldn't recommend putting any action on it, because you have 2 teams playing essentially for their playoff lives in week 2, and that's exciting stuff. Next up, Panthers, 8.5-point underdogs at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, total 47.5. And the Panthers come into this game as an 8-point road underdog. And I like them in this spot. I've been saying it since we previewed the NFC South. I think Tom Brady at this stage in his career is not a guy who can blow you out. I just don't feel that way with his arm talent. You have Godwin not at 100%. The running game, it was okay. Ronald Jones, surprisingly, was the one to get the bulk of the touches, even though Fournette and LaShawn McCoy are involved in the backfield as well. I just don't think that Tom Brady can carry a team the way he used to. And the team around him, from a cultural standpoint, isn't as good and as firm on the ground as the Patriots were. That Buccaneers team, they turned the ball over 3 times. 2 of them came on picks by Brady, but they also had over 100 yards in penalties in their loss to the New Orleans Saints. And that's where Brady's going to run into problems. He's not going to have a well-oiled machine around him to make up for his mistakes anymore. I don't think the Panthers win this game outright, but I loved what I saw from Teddy Bridgewater in week 1. 270 yards, no turnovers, threw 1 touchdown. Made sure to get out of Christian McCaffrey's way, let him score a couple of times. That's all you need from Bridgewater. Even though they lost, I loved what I saw from the Carolina offense, and I think that the defensive woes of the Panthers not going to be enough to get in their way against a washed-up quarterback like Tom Brady. Give me the 8.5. I'll take it. Next up, Broncos, 7.5-point underdogs, taking on the Steelers in Pittsburgh. 41 points is the total. Both of these teams played tremendous defense in week 1. Steelers 5-point favorites at the open, now up over a touchdown, which is why I want nothing to do with the spread in this game. I'm not impressed with Drew Lock. Struggled against the Titans without Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy, the rookie wide receiver, some big drops. We're still not sure of the status of Sutton. Very alliterative sentence I had to spit out there. I struggled with it. So we're not sure what the passing game is going to look like for Denver. And Ben Roethlisberger got into a bit of a rhythm in the second half against the Giants. No Von Miller still for the Broncos. I think Pittsburgh should win this game, but neither team showed me enough to justify pulling the trigger one way or the other. Bills-Dolphins up next. Buffalo, a 5.5-point favorite at Miami. Another low total here, 41. Neither team averaged over 5 yards of play last week. They were both in the bottom third of the league in terms of their yards per play average, which is concerning for the Bills more so than the Dolphins because Josh Allen is supposed to be their quarterback of the future, whereas Ryan Fitzpatrick is just a bridge to Tua Tagovailoa. Bills won by 10 against the Jets last week. Dolphins lost by 10 against the Patriots. So you could see an overreaction from those two results, putting a little bit of value in the Dolphins' corner. Dolphins at home in this game, high of 88 degrees. If you know anything about Buffalo, New York, this time of year, the high temperature, not usually 88 degrees. Could cause some conditioning issues for this Bills team. We'll see if the defense can hold up late in the game. Could be a closer game than we expect. I just don't like either team enough to make a decision one way or another. Staying in the AFC East, the New York Jets, 7-point home underdogs, taking on the San Francisco 49ers, total of 42. Super Bowl hangover in full effect. Last week for the Niners, they looked rough in their loss at home to the Arizona Cardinals. But a lot of love for them in this game. Line open Niners -4. People are hammering the Niners to get them all the way up to that touchdown spread. They are traveling from west to east in this game. And they had a much more impressive offensive performance despite losing last week, averaging 6 yards of play, over a full yard better than what the Jets were capable of in Buffalo. But of course, the Jets were on the road. The Niners were at home. Line is too high for my liking. Given the movement toward the end of the week, I do think the Niners win the ball game. But the Jets, only traveling from in-state, could be a little fresher than the Niners early in the game. Maybe you consider the Jets holding their own in the first half before all hell breaks loose in the Niners' favor later in the ballgame. Marquee matchup here in the NFC between a team that was in the Super Bowl not too long ago and a team that a lot of people think might be in the Super Bowl this year, when the Atlanta Falcons head to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Falcons 4.5-point dogs, highest total of the week here, 52.5. Now, this is the second straight week that the Cowboys have been involved in the game with the highest pregame total of the week. They were, of course, involved in a game with the Rams last week where the pregame total was 51.5. So again, lines makers expecting a lot out of the offense of the Dallas Cowboys. But injuries to the offensive line really, really hurt them against the Rams as Aaron Donald and company were able to get through and put a lot of pressure on Dak Prescott. They were able to limit Zeke Elliott in the running game. And it's possible that happens again, but I don't think that the Falcons have the personnel up front to make it quite as painful for the Cowboys. I will say this, though. The Cowboys' defense might be in trouble this week as the explosive passing game of the Falcons, with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, Todd Gurley doing things out of the backfield, they take on a Cowboys team. They're without Sean Lee at linebacker, and now Leighton Vander Esch, sort of the heir apparent to the defensive leadership role of Sean Lee. He's out too for Dallas. So those cluster injuries at linebacker could be a big problem in the short passing game and in run stopping for Dallas. With the injuries being what they are, and with the fact that I don't trust Matt Ryan, he struggled again last week against the Seahawks. This is a stay away from me personally. Now tell me, heading into last week, did you expect the Washington football team to be in first place in the NFC East all by themselves? And I do have a great voice. Thank you very much for noticing. But did you expect the Washington football team to be in first place in the NFC East all by themselves after last week? If you did, well, you probably made some money off of that because you would have had to have seen the Cowboys losing and the Giants losing, and then, of course, the football team beating the Eagles. That's exactly what happened. The planets aligned, and the Washington football team has never trailed in the NFC East since they have rebranded to the Washington football team. Well, they come into Arizona as 6.5-point dogs, total 48.5. And this is an interesting game because the Cardinals and Washington both were surprising last week. Let's not sell the Cardinals short here. They won outright at San Francisco in a game that they were expected to lose by a touchdown. And instead of picking a side between these surprising teams, I'll tell you this. I like the under in this matchup. The football team's pass rush was excellent against a banged-up offensive line for the Eagles, but they were excellent nonetheless. Kyler Murray, he's good at getting out of pressure situations, but I think that Washington will be able to keep him unsettled just enough to keep the Cardinals from putting up big point totals, which, by the way, they didn't do last week against the Niners either. They didn't score a ton of points in the win. And Washington's offense wasn't impressive at all last week. Needed a couple of gift turnovers, a turnover on downs deep in Eagles territory in order to put up the points that they did. I expect both teams to do just enough to keep each other out of sorts offensively to keep this game under the 46.5-point total. One of my favorite matchups this week takes place in the West. 8.5-point favorites at the Los Angeles Chargers, total 47.5. Opened at 6.5, so some love for the Chiefs, and that's always to be expected, especially when Pat Mahomes is leading a team against a team without an elite quarterback, and that's exactly what you have in the Chargers, as Tyrod Taylor did not play well last week in the season opener against the Bengals. Line is too high for me at 8.5, but I am not about to go on the other side, and let's say you go down 2 scores and you have Tyrod Taylor at quarterback against Patrick Mahomes. No, thank you. I don't want to be involved in that one bit. It's a no play for me, but I do think the Chiefs will win this game. Whether it'll be enough to cover the number is another story entirely. Another great matchup. And by the way, week 2, a lot of great matchups relative to what we saw in week 1. They put a lot of great teams against each other this week. Ravens -7 against the Texans falls into that category. Total of 50. Line is up a point, opened at Ravens -6. Ravens arguably with the most impressive week 1 performance with their 38-6 win over the Browns. Texans, not so much. They laid an egg in week 1 against the Chiefs, but they do have some extra rest this week coming off of the Thursday night game. They also return home for their first game of the season. And again, I think this is a spot where we're overreacting to 2 vastly different performances. When the Ravens played great, Texans didn't. I think the 2 teams will come back down to earth somewhat. I do think that the Texans cover the spread at +7. If you wait it out, maybe you get 7.5, given how much everybody loves Lamar Jackson. But I am on the Texans against the spread in this one. Sunday night, New England taking on Seattle in a rematch of the game where we all screamed at our televisions, why not hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the 1 yard line? Patriots won by 2 possessions last week against the Dolphins at home. Cam Newton looked great. He was active in the running game. We didn't know if we'd see that so early. 75 yards on the ground, also made it into the end zone. Seattle, meanwhile, destroying the Falcons in Atlanta, which has earned them the honor of being the favorites in this game. Seattle put up 6.6 yards per play against a weak Falcons defense, but they also gave up 6.6 yards per play. So their net yards per play was 0. That could be a problem against a Bill Belichick coach team who, of course, always has something for his opponents to throw them off. Right now, I don't know what to expect from the offense of New England. They only put up 21 points in that week 1 win over the Dolphins. And I think Belichick is going to hold some things back early on so as not to empty the bag with Cam Newton so early in the season. I'm going to stay away from this game. I don't trust the Seattle defense yet. I still don't fully know what to expect from the New England offense. Finally, our final quick slant of the evening, Monday Night Football, Saints 5.5-point underdogs at the Raiders, total of 49.5. Now, the Saints beat up on a public underdog in the Bucs last week. They looked great in doing it. Raiders with a surprising road win against the Panthers. And this is a game, first one ever held in Allegiant Stadium there in Las Vegas, the new home field of the Raiders. And one would think, oh, that might be a problem for the Saints on the road. Well, no fans in attendance. And the Saints, by the way, 7-1 against the spread on the road last season. If you didn't get it at the early number, no reason to lay close to 6 points now as this opened up at Saints -4. Going to sit it out instead of chasing a worse number. If it comes back down during the weekend, maybe we consider hitting it closer to that opening 4-point line. So those are your quick slants. And let's run down this week's picks as a result. Mentioned on Tuesday, had the Packers -6 over the Lions. Mentioned earlier in the show, Eagles pick 'em over the Rams at home. We have 4 more picks. Texans +7 over the Ravens. Chiefs and Chargers going over the 47.5, because while I think Mahomes and the Chiefs, I don't know if I trust them to cover the 8.5. You know they're going to put up points. We could see some garbage time where Tyrod Taylor has more room to hit some open receivers in that game. So I'm going with the over 47.5 there. Give me under 46.5 in the football team versus Cardinals matchup in Arizona. And give me the Panthers 8.5 over the Buccaneers. I love the Carolina Panthers getting more than a touchdown in that spot against a washed up Tom Brady. So those are your 6 picks for the week. We gave you a 6-pack after we went 4-0-1 in week 1. Let's hope the good luck and the good handicapping continues here in week 2. That's our show for the evening. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. This is Jay Sanin. That is it for the GBI show this week. Don't forget, Tuesday we'll recap week 2, tell you how I did on my picks, and we will preview week 3 on Tuesday as well. So good luck with your bets this weekend and enjoy the games. We'll see you next time.